From not moving heaven and earth to ensure a director-character match made in heaven became a reality, to missing out on the chance to see a beloved gang together again one last time, the Star Wars corner of our galaxy would have no doubt been that little more vibrant had these happenings actually come to life. Gareth here from What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 frustratingly obvious missed opportunities in Star Wars. Number 10. Not making Finpo a thing and an overall lack of LGBTQIA representation. I could likely fill an entire list with the vast amount of intriguing Finn storyline opportunities Disney and the various creatives involved in bringing the sequels into existence idiotically passed up on in favor of the dull and uninspired path John Boyega was made to wander down during his soul-crushing Star Wars stint. Yet arguably the most egregious decision the House of Mouse made over the course of the most recent set of Skywalker Saga flicks, centered around an evident flicker of affection between the one-time Stormtrooper and the galaxy's greatest pilot, Poe Dameron. As Boyega himself even put it, I think there could have been a very interesting forward-thinking, not even forward-thinking, just like current-thinking, love story there, something that hadn't quite been explored yet. But as the underutilized star would depressingly add, I would try to push it a bit in that direction, but the Disney overlords were not ready to do that. And outside of a blink and you'll miss it victory smooch at the end of Rise of Skywalker between two female resistance fighters, proper LGBTQIA representation still often feels like a depressing afterthought for one of the biggest franchises in the world. Number 9. Allowing Jar Binks to be a three-dimensional groundbreaker. With hindsight, it's easy to look back on George Lucas's creation of a certain bumbling Gungan as one of the most ill-advised projects ever to be committed to by the visionary filmmaker. After all, few characters, be they animated or live action, have ever experienced the sort of wholesale backlash outside of the younger demographic who understandably lapped up his unashamed goofiness Jar Binks was on the receiving end of upon his Phantom Menace debut. However, it's easy to overlook just how groundbreaking Ahmed Best's work as the towering elastic-tongued being actually was coming into the new millennium. Sitting as the first ever fully CGI supporting character audiences had ever witnessed, the opportunity was undoubtedly there for Lucas to craft an entity with the same level of care and detail that he had with the likes of Binks' live-action counterparts. Of course, he instead skipped on down the Goofy-inspired route, and the rest was painful history for the most part. But there was definitely a moment there when this earliest version of motion capture could have found itself at the center of a well-rounded and fleshed-out alien feature player. Number 8. Giving James Mangold the Boba Fett reins. Since the very second he slipped onto the scene sporting some of the most impressive armor the galaxy had ever known, fans the world over had been angling for a feature-length spell with Beskar brandishing badass Boba Fett. Then, after almost giving up on the hope of ever seeing the son of Jango fire his jetpack back onto the big screen, news finally broke of Logan Helmer James Mangold signing up to bring the space gunslinger's story into existence in 2018, and what looked like a match made in intergalactic heaven was finally set in motion. Only this evident open goal of a partnership was never actually part of the plan at all, according to Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy, that is. As the prolific producer would note to Empire magazine, Jim Mangold never worked on a Boba Fett story. So much for that then. And while fans did at least finally get a Boba story of sorts with his own book on Disney Plus recently, well, half of it at least, not moving heaven and earth to secure a director of Mangold's caliber for a Fett-focused project in general feels like one of the most baffling missed chances Kennedy and Lucasfilm have been a part of to date. Number 7. Refusing to double down on Snoke as the galaxy's new big bad. It wasn't too difficult to see why J.J. Abrams was all too happy to bring the Gollum guy along for the intergalactic ride upon setting out on his Force Awakens adventure. In Snoke, the director had what appeared to be his answer to the epitome of darkness himself, Emperor Palpatine, and a being that could brilliantly be forged and realized using the kit that Andy Serkis had become the undisputed master of. And his brief but stellar work on said first sequel entry went down an expected treat for the few minutes he was present on screen. Yet, in an attempt to defy expectations and set the story on a bold new path, Snoke was then dispatched with hilarious ease in The Last Jedi by his conflicted apprentice. What could have been Serkis' chance to immortalize himself as the galaxy's most formidable presence instead wound up being yet another turn of events that ended up wholly disappointing both fans and the actor himself. What could have been, eh? Number 6. Letting Han Solo live way too long. It's no secret that Harrison Ford wasn't exactly over the moon about having to stick around in George Lucas's playground. It wasn't because he didn't enjoy the experience of conversing with a talking carpet or numerous space wizards, though. Ford's issues with the overall time he spent walking among the living as Han Solo stem from the fact that he felt his character's death, had it come much earlier in his life than it ultimately did, would have lent more emotional weight to the story being told. It's hard to argue with the grouchy thespian's point of view either, as Solo sacrificing himself in the midst of the original trilogy's climactic battle over the galaxy would have undoubtedly made for a more compelling use of the character at the time. But at least Ford still got his sacrificial wish in the end. Well, sort of. Number 5. Having Benicio del Toro in your movie and completely wasting him. The casting of the unmistakable Benicio del Toro as an unknown entity in this new Disney branch of Skywalker Saga flicks brought with it an understandable amount of expectation. He had one of the most enigmatic and enthralling performers of his generation, and he was now getting the chance to stretch his legs in a galaxy known for playing host to more than its fair share of bizarre presences. Yet instead of gifting Del Toro with a sizable amount of bantha meat to get his teeth sunk into, the Sicario and Snatch sensation was tasked with bringing the stuttering computer system slicer that was the underwhelming DJ to the Last Jedi table. And while having a morally grey character take up residence in the galaxy far, far away wasn't the worst idea in the world, the fact rumours and even the actor himself had hinted at Del Toro's mark being made as the feature's main antagonist left many feeling a little cheated by the time Rian Johnson's film's credits began to roll. Sure, he didn't put in a bad shift by any means, but DJ was forgotten about by both fans and the series as a whole by the time Rise of Skywalker stumbled onto our screens. Number 4. Glossing over the Skywalker lightsaber's adventure. Anakin Skywalker's clear blue lightsaber has been a mainstay on the big screen from George Lucas's very first punch into hyperspace. However, while the gaps were filled in somewhat when it came to the legendary saber's journey coming into that initial A New Hope reveal by one Obi-Wan Kenobi via Lucas's prequel tales, the same cannot be said about the period in between his original trio of flicks and Disney's more modern offerings, with J.J. Abrams quickly glossing over how in the holy hell Maz Kanata came into possession of this ever-present Jedi weapon before it's passed on to Finn and eventually Rey in The Force Awakens. Fans were given absolutely no information as to what its journey had entailed in the time since falling down a shaft in Cloud City with Luke's hand still wrapped around it. Either through brief vivid flashback sequence or even just the apparently deleted opening sequence of Luke's saber-wielding hand floating through space, a small brush up on the well-known Blade's adventures post-Empire Strikes Back would not have gone amiss. Number 3. Not fulfilling the Knights of Ren's potential. Upon first being glimpsed in The Force Awakens promotional material alongside the formidable Kylo Ren, it's not hard to see why fans of all ages were a little excited about the prospect of a group of jet black badasses by the name of the Knights of Ren. However, outside of throwaway name drops, the odd flashback sequence, and acting as Kylo's silent backing dancers for much of their all-too-brief showing in Rise of Skywalker, the sequels failed to really deliver anything of note when it came to interesting developments involving the crew of mysterious antagonists. And while the group have been fleshed out a little more on the page lately, the fact they never really got their moment in The Two Sons is still a tough pill to swallow for those who fist-pumped at their awesome initial reveal all those years ago. Number 2. Giving us more of a glimpse into Kylo's training and Luke's Jedi Academy. While Ben Solo's time sitting underneath his Uncle Luke Skywalker's learning tree, whilst taking up a spot in the legendary Jedi's Academy, was briefly touched upon via flashbacks on the big screen, it did still feel like the sequel films in general didn't spend anywhere near enough time reliving and depicting the bond that was once shared between this master and apprentice before Solo's eventual defection. Had the features found time to showcase the pair's journeys across the galaxy to find ancient artifacts and Solo's relationships with his fellow Padawans, perhaps the true weight of the fall of Luke's Jedi Temple would have been more substantially felt by the time it was revisited on the big screen. Instead, much of this dense storytelling potential is skipped over on screen in favor of jumping straight to the moment Luke arguably triggered his nephew's fateful fall to the dark side, leaving much of the real meat of this compelling Skywalker chapter on the comic book page instead. Number 1. Never getting the OG gang fully back together again. While each of the original trilogy's leading lights did at least find themselves with a decent spell in the spotlight over the course of their long-awaited returns to the galaxy far, far away, the record will always show that Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and Han Solo never actually found their way back into the same frame upon their eventual big-screen comebacks. Sure, the fact Luke and Han didn't get a chance to pick up where they left off with a bit of brother-in-law banter, for example, did pave the way for rather poignant beats such as Skywalker coming to terms with the loss of the one-time smuggler, a moment then bizarrely omitted from The Last Jedi's original cut, mind. But regardless of whatever storyline hoops would have needed to be jumped through in order to achieve the interaction, even just a momentary back and forth between the charismatic trio would have been enough to leave those who grew up taking in the unmatched chemistry of Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, and Harrison Ford in the OG flicks with a tear in their eye and a smile on their faces. At least we'll always have the memories though, eh? Man, that's a depressing way to end a list. But that is our list. Know of any other frustratingly obvious missed opportunities in Star Wars? Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're at it. I have been Gareth from What Culture Star Wars. Thank you as always for clicking on this great video today. May the Force be with you, and have the best of days possible. Bye bye.